But I thought I would start as the opening batsman of the human tendency in this conference by doing something that humans have a talent for doing, namely asking what you might regard in this context as a dumb question. And that question is, why? Why do we need to be resilient to so many things? And why is it that there's this extraordinary coming together of organizations and institutions and smart people and networks, all of whom regard the need for resilience as being self-evident? But my contribution is to say, are we sure that we've expanded the range of possible responses? We've heard from the amazing introductions today that there are a number of definitions. Can you read that? It's quite small, isn't it? Life is full of surprises, the hidden connections in complex situations that can come and take us by surprise, designing for the unexpected, food price hikes that come out of the dark to take us by surprise. There's an obesity pandemic we heard about, blood minerals, dreadful, dreadful things. But wait a minute. Are we not missing something here? Are we not perhaps missing the causes of these developments in the world? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to turn around because it's so small on there. The causes of these tremendously challenging things, why are we not including that in the agenda of what preparing for resilience means? And I have to say that when I heard the presentations this morning to generalize hopelessly, I had a slight feeling that the people were saying, oh, it just happened. It came off in my hand, Gov. Honest, it just did it. Oh, blimey, look what happened. That's what we used to say in the bus business when we drove into something. Look what happened. I'd driven into something. We heard a bit about the risk business, which I happened to be in a seminar with Ulrich Beck, who wrote a book about it, I think 20 years ago now. And few people in our kind of writerly world can have been responsible for the birth of such a dynamic, thrusting and global industry, because he told me that the global risk business, which you see Lloyd's of London there, is one of its epicenters. You can now get covered for up to 500 different kinds of risk. And on the level left, you don't need to worry, this will all be online later, is one of the many maps. We saw some this morning. The kind of, this is the World Economic Forum chart of the terrible things that can come to disrupt things. But the only small problem that I've observed with this alleged subject of managing risk is that nobody in that extraordinary world regards it as important to remove the causes of these possible outcomes. What they do is to make damn sure that somebody else and their client pays for the consequences of when an unpleasant eventuality happens. Two examples from this morning, I just slipped these in. We heard about the unexpected arrival of an obesity pandemic, which is bankrupting the health systems of the world and causing all manner of social and economic disruptions. Come off it. The obesity pandemic is a cause because there is more fat in the food of people in more and more populations. And where does that fat come from? Does it come out of the sky? No, that fat comes from the industrial strategies of the international food business, for whom it's an explicit strategy to put fat and other additives in food for a variety of reasons. It does not come out of thin air. And there are very physical signs which demonstrate that. And I'm glad you've had the lunch, because this is my sort of one shock picture. Top right is the sewage system under Times Square, where all the restaurants evacuate their kind of cooking utensils full of fat. And the bottom right is it's somebody's heart disease, the fat coming out of somebody who eats too much fat because of the industrial food system. Another question we heard this morning about blood minerals. We didn't know, this is absolutely shocking, that blood minerals would be part of the kind of modern world that we're in. Is this one of the, I'm sorry to be, it made me so angry, this is one of the kind of inequity, one of the unfortunate byproducts of the benefits of globalization. We've known for 25 years that there is a whole series of social and ecological disasters associated with the mining of rare and raw materials. It's just, and it's not as if it's a secret, it's just we have chosen not to look. We are mesmerized by a culture of consumption, you know, the kind of apple myth. And so we think, oh my God, blood minerals, they've come to out of thin air. How do we mitigate against the risk of that? Well, then what happens is you get some guy like this who's a kind of trader who says, oh, we can handle that. Not that he is going to go and do anything about the blood minerals, but he will make certain that Apple, or companies like it, or GE, as we heard about this morning, makes certain that they don't have any price to pay, either formally in terms of lawsuits or informally in terms of reputation. He moves the risk, the consequences of the action to somebody else. Because the risk business is so massively effective at doing this job, that any incentive on the kind of primary actors to do anything about it is removed. The other problem with the risk business is that there are one or two things that it, even with those 500, it misses out. Risk number 501, which you can see here actually where the Lloyd's building is located, is the fantastic energy intensity of this global economy that keeps springing surprises on us. I have to kind of show you a picture. Do you remember 2 weeks ago a guy was kind of climbed the Shard, which is the tallest building in Europe, took these spectacular pictures of London by night, very beautiful. But it did kind of trigger me to say, just roughly how much more energy intensive is our economy than it was in the past? And I found a man called Earl Cook, who's a kind of an anthropologist who measures human development by the amount of energy that they extract from the environment. It's a complicated story, but to cut a long story short, before we were modern, and before we were civilized, and before we had risk management and all of its associated skills, the average hunter-gatherer would be able to get by on 5,000 kilocalories a day. Some food, the odd fire, bit of materials. Today, after 10,000 or thereabouts of development, innovation, and modernization, the number is 300,000 kilocalories per person per day, which is 60 times more energy and resource intensity in the economy than was the case of our backward and unenlightened forebears. Risk, that's risk number 501, is that is a kind of pretty scary. 60 times more for the same human being with the same physiology, more or less, as we had in the past. Risk number 502 is not content with having created an economic system which devours energy and resources at an increasing rate, but also we've created an economy and a system that can only survive if it grows perpetually to infinity. Very sensible. So there's Mario Monti, the new Prime Minister of Italy, who, when he was sworn into his job by the Italians, uttered the word growth 28 times and the word energy 0 times. So somebody who is presented to us as a technocrat omitted to mention the biophysical basis of the world economy that he's been put in charge of trying to save. The economy is a physical thing. You cannot expand physical things to infinity, particularly in a planet which is finite like our own, as we've heard in various ways already today. And we are regarded as the kind of basic task of policy and economics and education and culture and sheer passion to grow to eternity. What kind of risk management is that? Growth to infinity in a physical world is in a finite world. Not a good idea. There will be bad consequences of trying to do that. Risk or certainty? What do you think? So this is one of the kind of terrible kind of disaster areas. I promised myself not to kind of go over the top on being kind of offensive about this, but I felt it necessary to make a distinction between the consequences of natural disasters and the resilience that follows from that, which is admirable and excellent. And that is not the result of a tsunami or an earthquake. That is the result of the energy policy of China. And that is the Three Gorges Dam today, or the last year, Edwin Bertinsky's photographs, showing what happened to a previously pretty much idyllic area like the one we're sitting here in Iceland. That is the necessary and predictable consequence of uncontrolled growth in which energy intensity is part of that growth dynamic. And that's why I get cross when, it said, oh, don't worry, we'll build you a better shock absorber. So that is what resilience, which leaves out the logic that drives us to these situations. Okay, we'll make you a better shock absorber, so when that happens to Iceland, which could conceivably happen if it becomes an energy kind of beetle, we will make sure that we're resilient and can deal with the unfortunate consequences of what is otherwise unavoidable progress. Welcome to the Anthropocene. We saw this already this morning. And I'll tell you the weird thing about this whole trajectory of the Anthropocene is that it's, to me, a kind of self-evident we should all, as human beings, apologize on our knees for the dreadful damage that we've done. We can probably argue that it wasn't our fault because we're behaving like any other species. We occupy opportunities and we do our thing as living creatures. But we've had a few things like, fossil fuel and logic and science to kind of accelerate the process. But no, the Anthropocene, a whole number of people looking at this kind of Death Star of impacts and breaking boundaries say, yes, we are the human beings who created this trouble. We and only we have the expertise and the right to fix the problem. And that is what geoengineering and quite a lot of the solutions are around at the moment are about. We are cleverer than everybody else. We are on top. We are above. Therefore, it is for us to fix the problem. Which is why there are certain people called doomers who say, it's all going badly and we're going to get out of time. This is from that film, The Road. Has anybody seen The Road? It's Cormac McCarthy. It's one of the most gloomy of the doomer kind of scenarios. We're getting the hell out of the Anthropocene. Just by way of a cinematographic aside for 1 second, the color of the road and the color of the Three Gorges dams, very similar. See that gray? And they didn't have any connection. This is some sort of default end of civilization color. But the top left one is a film, and the top right one is China today. It's not all a fairy story. But supposing we want to get away from this notion that as the authors of this unpleasant economic structure, we need to go somewhere else, where are we going to go to? Destination, the Ecozoic. Now, I'm not a botanist or a biologist, but this is basically one of my heroes, Thomas Berry, who wrote of this condition yet to be achieved, the reintegration of human endeavors into a larger ecological consciousness, which is to say, not regarding the left as before and the right as progress, but actually started to rethink, as Andrew indeed invited us to do, time frames and this logics of what is going forwards and what it's getting back. Fewer than 20% of the people in the world regard history as something going in a straight line from then till the future. 80% of us think that it goes in cycles. So, question, and by the way, human nature is pretty stable, formed by our life as hunter-gatherers, and all this stuff on the right is a kind of slight deviation, and it's a mistake, but we can start to rectify that mistake by looking backwards for help and models and practical advice as well. A couple of books, if you want to read this, I was saying to somebody, I am getting weird, but people have been there before me. So coming home to the Pleistocene is what was economic life in pre-modern times like? Paul Shepard, if you know him, he's just a gorgeous writer. And then there's another slightly more recent one called Limited Wants, Unlimited Means. Again, a reader on hunter-gatherer economics. Nowhere in those books do they say, okay, you turn back from modernity to the Stone Age, but there are aspects of practical but also metaphorical and imaginary life that we can damn well use because we need to. But I thought I should just concentrate on the practical side of what the Ecozoic might mean, and this is where I do move into the space of living examples that Andrew asked me to focus on. But on the left is a Jequitiba tree, which is, I was in Brazil recently. I'm a proper tree hugger as well as a lichen hugger. The main thing you need to know about the Jequitiba tree is that it, about 4 tons of water, it takes from the ground upwards into its canopy every day, without pumps, architects, business plans, money from Qatar. You get the picture. On the right is the shard, which needed all that and a lot more beside. So therefore, the Ecozoic is one in which we rely on natural energy because that's what we're going to have left, give or take a few transition periods. natural energy in which it gets the 4 tons of water from the ground to the canopy without any pumps or anything like that, applied right across the board of what we have now, more or less, somehow. I'll leave that to you, the details. Combined with the social energy that we've heard so much about. We are creative. We may be a tiny bit destructive, but we're also very socially creative. So the Ecozoic is where we combined the creativity that we have as people, but with the sensibility of the natural world as our partners, natural and social energy combined. Some examples. That means 4 minutes. Okay, I'm going to have to... Water wizards in China, where they clean water using water hyacinths. People in Austria who capture rainwater to make it fun. Urban farmers, see them everywhere. Some of those stories might be a bit kind of alien to your daily experience, but you'll see them everywhere. De-pavers. This is now officially part of Portland, Oregon's city plan to do de-paving. It's kind of until recently been a bit of a kind of activist artist thing. But in lots of cities, people are digging up car parks and abandoned sites and turning them into productive gardens. It's little bits, but you start to multiply them and you see the nature of cities change. Permacultivators, there's a whole lecture I'll spare you on permaculture, you'll be pleased to hear. Urban composters, Will Allen, not a normal kind of tree-hugging green guy, a kind of enterpriser, a social enterprise, making a self-sustaining business, transforming the fortunes of disadvantaged people, and bringing natural process back into urban contexts. These are some friends of mine in St. Etienne who grow and salvage and forage for herbs in a previously very polluted part of an industrial part of France. This is the Brooklyn Brewery, one of my favorite places on the planet since I went to a craft brewing evening there. Fermentation, energy-free, nature does the work. You get beer out of it. What can be wrong with that? Remakers, we don't need to dig up conflict minerals in the Democratic Republic of Congo if we start using the 60-year supply of potential refuse in the cities of the world by MIT study. Recycling structures and things. This is actually not a real thing, but this is a project about how we would use the oil when they ground the aviation fleet because of the energy crisis. What will we do with all the planes other than park them in Arizona? Answer, turn them into gardens. And absorbers. How do we just radically protect the tendency of young people to know this stuff instinctively before we put them into education and turn them into office-occupying zombies? There will need to be 1 or 2 adjustments to our thinking and practice in the Ecozoic. The well-being of man, which I know is very popular with everybody in this room, has to be somewhat qualified about the well-being of all of life. That is a difference. It's a 400-year project that has to be, well, we did that. We did the Enlightenment. We did rationality. We did man on top. Now we're going into a new phase called we are in this together with the other life. From the extractive to the regenerative. I don't need to explain that. From dividing up the world into industrially productive areas, into bioregions of one kind or another. We heard about watersheds, that beautiful presentation before lunch about the Balinese system. At the same time, a 1,000-year-old system and absolutely appropriate today. And the connection of all this with a human dimension of resilience, because I knew that Andrew would be getting restive by this point. These are the guys that we should be working for. As I said, the children across cultures who naturally understand that we are not apart from nature, we are not in charge, man is not on top. If we're going to have a future, it has to be in one in which we are doing things together with other aspects of life. Our job is to help them do the things that we've been less successful at doing. Thank you.
Well,